Hey, I'm Kelly, and welcome to the whole podcast, KC. Thanks for tuning in and hope you enjoy the show. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly, host of the whole podcast, KC. Today we have Carrie and Connor with CCVI. Thank you guys for coming on today.
Oh, thank you for having us.
We're thrilled to be here.
Great. Well, we will just go ahead and get started here. Tell us a little bit of how CCVI got started.
Yeah. So again, thank you so much for having us, Kelly. It's really an honor to be here and get to talk to you guys today. Children's Center for the Visually Impaired. We were an organization that was founded about 72 years ago. So we have really been in Kansas City in the heart of it for a really long time, serving kids who are blind or have low vision. I think there's two things that really come to mind that are pretty interesting about our origin story. The first is that we started actually in the basement of a church, Country Club Methodist Church, which was a one-room classroom at the time back in 1952 with only a handful of kids and one teacher of the visually impaired, which is really actually ironic because it kind of becomes the heart of what we transitioned to over the next handful of decades. So as we sort of grew and got started, I think the thing that really always was at the heart of CCVI was our need to fill a need in the community that wasn't being met, which was the education of children who are blind or have low vision. So over that course of time, we went on to serve from that initial classroom that had less than 10 kids in it. We went on to serve between 12 to 13,000 kids in our history, which of course started in just one zip code and one church in Kansas City, that now has transitioned to be across 48 counties and about 147 zip codes. So really, that's kind of how we got started and what sort of propelled us into the work we do now.
Wow, that's great. I love that. All right. Can you share a little bit about your mission and goals?
Yeah, so the mission of Children's Center for the Visually Impaired is to prepare children with visual impairments, including those with multiple disabilities, to reach their highest potential in the sighted world. So, really, what that means in a practical sense is making sure that our kids have the best foundation and the best blueprint for what their educational path will be going forward. We start that off from pretty much the time that a child is born with a visual impairment, and we'll be able to serve them if they need it all the way up until about age 21. So it's a really impactful organization that serves a broad range of kids across multiple impairments and multiple disabilities to be able to do what a lot of people think they can't do. So when we look at our goals, I think the big thing that comes to mind is number one, making sure that we have the right staffing in place. Because really, if you take care of the people who are taking care of people, they're going to do great things for kids. So that's where we always like to start is with our people and making sure that we take care of them, and then they're able to then take care of the kids that they have in their classrooms or on their caseload out in school districts all across the metro and beyond. So that's one goal, but I obviously defer to Carrie too as our executive director on what her goals really were when she started with us about 3 years ago.
Yeah, really the same, just to ensure that any child that has a visual impairment, no matter when that happens in their life, it might be from birth or it might be due to a medical situation when they're in kindergarten. We want to make sure that we're partnering with those districts to ensure that kiddos are getting what they really need.
All right. How does CCVI support children with visual impairments and their families?
So I would say the first thing that families would tell you when you speak to them about CCVI and their experience there would be that they came for a functional vision eval. Their ophthalmologist, their neurologist sent them to CCVI. They walked in the door. They probably weren't terribly sure why they were there or what was going to happen that day. But when they left, they will all tell you consistently they felt empowered, they felt knowledgeable, and they felt like they had something they could do for their child when they got home. So that's probably the first thing that we do for families is that functional vision eval. And it's a time in a small room with the family and a teacher of the visually impaired, and usually another therapist, could be a physical therapist or an occupational therapist, just really figuring out how does this child use their language or their, sorry, how does this child use their vision and how how does that family support that? That's really what that day is all about. So that's probably where I would start with how do we support families?
Mhm.
One of the other things that we do really specifically for families, children benefit as well, is a family night, a family engagement night, pretty much monthly. That could look like, and again, it's dinner. So we're trying to really build a community because we're having some dinner together with parents. We've got childcare provided for them by staff members so that it's people that know these children and can keep them safe. And families can have a no anxiety time away from their child. And we provide them with lots of education. We might talk about transitions and some of the pitfalls of those, or IEP meetings and how to be a good advocate for your child. But we also might just host a really fun play to learn event where families bring all the kids and they just come and play together and they're playing side by side with others that they are getting to know. So that's another way that families really appreciate that we bring them together. So that's really open to anyone in the community that has a child with a vision impairment. So those would be the two ways. The other ways would be through our programming. And as I've mentioned, there there are 3 programs really that we host, but we do a lot of other things as well. So we go into homes and we do, a first steps type of program for birth to 3. We have an on-site school and we go into local schools. It could be private, it could be public, it could be charter, it doesn't matter. We're going into those schools if they need us. We're filling that gap for them. The other thing that I think we do a really nice job of is really partnering with our local providers, could be school districts, whoever, and ensure, or families, and ensure that they really have all the tools they need. That could be professional development for their staff because they have a new student in their school that they've never had a visually impaired student. Help us. We may come in and walk um, their building, the building that that child's going to spend their day in, and say, hey, you need to mark this step. This needs to happen. That needs to happen. Really help them with environmental. You might need to clean this bulletin board up. It's way overstimulating for the student. So let's change that a little bit. It's that type of thing. We provide braille services. There are a lot of things that we do, but really the heart of it is what does that child need to be successful? What do you need us to help you with? And let us help you. That's that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Great, great. What advice would you have for parents who are adjusting to having a child with a visual impairment?
So my first piece of advice would probably be to seek out others. So this is it's a low incidence population. There's a good chance that they don't just know or have someone in their neighborhood
Mhm.
that has a visual impairment. So it's going to take a little bit of work. That's part of what our job is, quite frankly, at CCVI. We really hope that there's a medical provider in your world that has sent you to CCVI because that's typically how parents find out about us. Our hope is also that they connect with families at CCVI. We provide lots of parent groups, times for parents to really come together in with meals, with childcare support, to learn together, to play as families together. So we hope they will become part of a community. If it's our community or another, it doesn't really matter. I just feel like they should be part of a community.
Right.
I think they really need to look for research based practices that are happening because this is a field where there's a lot of change going on. And so we
Mm.
want to make sure that they're staying with a provider or in a community that really is kind of cutting edge. And the other thing I would say is to really realize that every family member is going to approach life with this new truth in a different way and to really have patience and grace with each other as a family because this is sometimes some tough stuff that families are
Mm.
going through. And so knowing that everyone's going to come at it in a completely different way with different feelings at different times is really important so that that family unit stays strong and is supportive of each other.
Right, and I
Mm.
would chime into that too. when Carrie talks about connecting with other families, I just had a parent say this to me last month. And she said, a parent of a child with special needs is a powerful force. But when you get parents together, plural, that's really what creates a movement. And so I think that when you can find individuals who are going through really a grieving process when they have a child who's diagnosed blind, right, and grieving the loss of that visual element, I think that it's so, so important for them to be able to meet other families on their journey and to be able to say, hey, look, we were there 6 years ago when my child was born. Now my child's in kindergarten and they are rocking it. And that's a
Mhm.
really, really powerful thing to be able to look forward and see, just like Carrie's talking about.
Definitely community is so important,
It is.
Mhm.
It
very
is.
much.
I actually just had an alumni who's probably in his 50s.
Mhm.
His mother reached out the other day because in our newsletter, she saw a story about a student who had the same diagnosis as her son, and it is a very rare diagnosis. And so she wanted to make sure that I had permission to share her information with that family because it's another local family that will have had not the same experience, but a similar experience
Similar.
and
Mhm.
understand. So that's really cool. We have a really strong community that even, when their kids are 50, they're still calling and saying, "Hey, I think I can support this family." I'm
Wow.
happy to do that. So very cool.
Love that, love
Mhm.
that. Can you share a success story that jumps out to you guys concerning
Go ahead.
CCVI?
So when I think about success, right, I think about what can we do as an agency to make sure that we reduce as many barriers as possible for the incredible, vibrant individual that our students are, right? So, one incredible success story that comes to mind, and I absolutely love the provider, he's a great friend. He sees a student that is in high school, and this student is in an orchestra class, right? So, she is an incredible musician, wants to participate in class, with all of her peers and be able to really have that traditional orchestra music class experience in high school, right? That's such a great goal for one of our students. Absolutely incredible. What we found when we went in there is that the student would oftentimes get really far behind the class as they're playing their song, right, in the music sheets, because it was a lot for her when she had super, super large print music sheets to be able to turn all those pages and keep track of all the pages when the pages were gigantic, right? To be able to have, the print big enough for her to be able to see it and be able to play at the exact same time. So, what our teacher, the visually impaired, came in and did is sat through a few sessions, workshopped some things, trialed some things, and really was able to come in and figure out, okay, so if the large print isn't working, what's our next step after this? He found a Bluetooth pedal that could connect to her iPad to be able to have the sheet music on her iPad, and she could step on the pedal and that would flip the page. And that solved the problem of her being behind with the rest of her orchestra class and the music playing. So I think that when we talk about what do success stories look like, usually they're in some sort of format of, okay, let's have an initial idea, let's trial it. It doesn't work. Let's try something else. That doesn't work. Let's trial something else, and eventually you find the right combination, the right ingredients to be able to have a really, really phenomenal classroom or extracurricular experience for students.
Well, I love that. I technology has come so far. That's an amazing tool. I love that.
Yeah, but I'm sure Carrie has a ton
Yeah.
too.
So I guess the one that I will share is a student that it's a little bit of a different story. A student that would have never been at CCVI from birth to kindergarten was in a local kindergarten classroom. They actually thought he had COVID for quite some time, but he actually had a brain tumor. So they go in and they're able to remove that brain tumor. He is beautiful and lovely, but he has lost all vision. And so, pretty big change. Grandma calls and says, he won't get out of bed. Well, he doesn't know how to orient and be mobile when he has lost one of his senses. So, we talked to the school district. They're not sure, what they're supposed to do. That's not a typical experience. And so, really partnering, and that's what it was. It was this beautiful collaboration between family, school district, and CCVI, which is exactly how it should look. And that kiddo came to CCVI, spent about a year with us. We built a ton of skills. He was super fun.
Mhm.
And he's back at school with his peers and his neighbors playing and doing exactly what he should be. That's that was great. We've stayed in contact with that district. We still support, but that kiddo is absolutely the story that you want, right?
Great success
Mhm.
story. Agreed.
Yep.
Perfect. What would be or what do you guys see as the biggest misconceptions in the community when it comes to children who have visual impairments?
I think probably the initial thing that always stands out to me about visual impairments and a misconception with it is that visual impairment is a disability. It's not a disability, it's a diagnosis, right? And so what we really want to be able to instill in our families is that their child can still do whatever they strive to do, right? So for example, a great, event that we do is Beat Kickball, which is really a partnership with a lot of agencies around Kansas City. But one of the things that's super, super impactful about Beat Kickball is the ability for the parents to be able to sit on the sidelines just like they would at a baseball or softball game for their child who is in elementary school or middle school and be able to see them participate, work on a team, have social interaction, learn how to wait their turn to go up to kick, learn how to navigate the field, right? And be able to make plays and score runs and, get outs and have that really traditional experience. Um, that's a huge misconception that we try to undermine really is the fact that, you can have a really, really beautiful, healthy engaging life even with a visual impairment. So treating it not as a disability, but as a diagnosis is always step one for us.
I think the other thing that I would add to that, and I agree with everything Connor just said, but I think I would add a lot of people assume that a visual impairment is a visual impairment, and every visual impairment is as different as the human who has that visual impairment, right? Every
Mhm,
one of us is completely different people. We have different needs. We need different access. So I think the community sometimes tries to understand it. I think it comes from a place of good intent, and they really feel like maybe everyone is totally blind if you have a visual impairment.
mm,
Not true.
mhm,
Or that they have this one certain one that I knew of because I had a kiddo in school with me. So they
mhm.
try to figure it out. It's good intent, but it's a very individualized um it's a very individualized thing. And so we want to make sure that we always honor that and help people understand how to best interact and support that child with their disability.
Right. And I think that, along that same point too, there's such a stereotype out there that you know, all people who are visually impaired look the same. But I mean, if you go into our center-based program, our early learning academy, you see individuals of all walks of life with multiple impairments, some physical, some developmental. And so I think that really breaking down the stereotype that, vision services and vision care like we provide is exclusive to one subset of the population of visual impairments. It's important that all kids who have a visual impairment get the services that they need, regardless of what their other diagnoses are.
Perfect. All right. What changes would you guys like to see in education and healthcare for children with visual impairments?
How long do we have? So let's start with education. I would say in education, really advocacy and knowledge would be my two big pieces. But the thing I have to say as well is really about recruiting. We have a critical national shortage of both teachers of the visually impaired and orientation and mobility specialist.
Mm,
So we can advocate for these things. And but if there's no one there to actually provide the service, then we have a problem, right?
mhm,
So that's one of the pieces that education really is going to have to get, and that's not just about vision. They've got a lot of things to work on in that arena, but
mhm,
for vision specifically, that's something we need to do. I think the other thing I would say in education is that as a retired public school administrator of special education, I did not know about cortical visual impairment. There's an ocular visual impairment and there's a neurological visual impairment. I knew about the ocular. I did not know about the cortical. So, what was I missing and what were my students missing? Because it wasn't just me, because when I ask all my peers that I've worked with for many years who are experts and do amazing work in this field, they don't know about cortical visual impairment. So, it's really getting the word out that if there's kiddos with certain red flags, there's a good chance that there is a processing issue between that eye and that brain, and schools and parents and doctors all need to really know about that because there's a lot of really great treatment out there that can change things
Mm.
and make things significantly better for that student as they learn growing up. So that's probably what I would say about education. Medical, from our standpoint, medical, we will pay for physical therapy, but we won't pay for orientation and mobility, and I can't quite figure that out. So we want you to be able to walk, but you won't actually be able to go anywhere because you can't see. So that piece is really boggling to my mind. We need a lot of work around advocacy and healthcare. And then again, I will say recruitment. We really are struggling with pediatric ophthalmologists and pediatric neurologists. They
Mm.
simply don't exist.
Really?
We've lost several in this community and we
Mhm.
need to replace them, but we have not yet. So that's highly concerning and really impactful to our families.
For sure.
Right, and I would chime in too, and this is actually something I got from Carrie. Carrie's selling herself short when she says she's a retired public school special education administrator because, I mean, this is someone who's been in the field for 30 years, so she knows what's going on and what the boots on the ground roles look like in schools. And I think that, for us, collaboration always needs to be and is the most important element in education. So, I mean, it's a phenomenal resource to have Carrie on the team who has that background and can really know what are the pain points for special education staff, across Missouri and Kansas, and what can we do to partner better? I think one thing that Carrie always says that really resonates with me and, my personal experience is that special education is very reactive. It's not very proactive. So I think that when we look at what's really missing, it's screening and identification as early as possible, because what Carrie talks about wanting to do some substantial progress and some really, really incredible interventions, that can't happen unless we get there early. So figuring out ways to get into homes as quickly as possible, to find as many kids as possible who are undiagnosed and really be able to make that intervention as soon as we find them, is that would be the biggest game changer for both medical and educational.
Agree. Well said.
Definitely, definitely being proactive, just having a disability myself is definitely the key there. What does a typical day look for children and staff at CCVI?
So we have several different programs. We'll start with the Birth to Three program, and those service providers are in the homes of our families. So their day looks like prepping up, and those families are prepping for them to come and sit on their floor. They sit on that floor with that family and that kiddo, and they teach them and work beside them to really model and help families feel empowered so that they really can help their child along that um, the learning journey, I guess. So that's one part. The next part would be our, as Connor just described, our preschool that's on site. And I probably shouldn't use the word preschool because we definitely have kindergartners and first graders. So our on site school, you have staff that are prepping for the day. They might be brailing lessons, they might be prepping materials so that kids can come in. But that day really is used to build skills just like a school would, but really with a lot of thoughtful interaction between staff. So we're building skills, but we're also working on that expanded core curriculum. We're ensuring that kids are learning self advocacy. We're ensuring that, and this is across all of our programs, but really doing good planning with multiple providers together to ensure that those kiddos are getting really high quality experiences. Then we have our MOVE program, which is our mobile outreach for vision education. And we are out in schools. So we have providers every morning packing up, brailing materials, getting things ready to go out to those community schools. They walk in the door, they work with those staff, they work with that student directly. And so they're spending their day there. So our days look varied
Very.
depending on
Mhm.
what you're doing at that moment. And lots of our staff do multiple of those jobs. So they have a really interesting day, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and I would also chime in too about two things. One, of course, the Early Learning Academy, which Carrie spoke to as kind of that preschool aged program, but does go kind of beyond some of those preschool years. What that program does not look like is putting our kids in bubble wrap. We want our kids to be able to have in a safe environment the ability to fall down and scrape their knee because of their orientation and mobility skills that are they're trying to sharpen, right? and that's okay. It's okay for them to fall down and scrape their knee because every kid falls down and scrapes their knee.
Mhm.
So really we want to make sure that whenever they do transition, whether that is in their kindergarten year or their first grade year, that they feel ready to go into a school environment full of children who do have their sight and they feel comfortable and confident in that overstimulated environment. So that's a really, really important piece of the Early Learning Academy that Carrie was alluding to. And then the one thing I would also say too about our MOVE program, and we can always talk about this more too, but that's really a lot of going to places that have vacancies all across a geographic range. So, when we talk about, kind of our footprint, I think, for a long time we were kind of just in that Kansas City region. Now, we're going all the way up nearly to, kind of like the Nebraska Iowa border.
Oh, wow.
We're going really far south too. We're trying to go out there towards the east as well. So that's really what we've wanted to expand in is where's the need? Let's get there.
Definitely. All right. Well, we are going to take a quick ad break and we will be right back.
Life can present challenges, but the whole person believes in turning challenges into triumphs. Our staff is trained to provide compassionate, personalized care that enhances the lives of our consumers, enabling them to live independently and with dignity. The whole person believes in the power of human connection. Our staff extends their reach into vibrant communities, fostering connections and creating moments of joy for every consumer we serve. Whether that's through peer support groups, adaptive sports, employment services, or non-emergency medical transportation, our staff provides exceptional care and become trusted companions and confidants. Your donation will help us continue to expand our programs and services to help people with disabilities remain independent and living in their home. Consider giving a gift today. Thank you.
All right. And we are back from our ad break with Carrie and Connor from CCVI. All right. And continuing, one of your guys' biggest events is the trolley run. Can you guys tell us a little more about that event and kind of what's all involved in
Yeah,
that?
of course. So number one, I love talking about the trolley run because it's truly one of my favorite days of the year. Trolley run is the largest fundraising event for Children's Center for the Visually Impaired, but it's a lot more than a fundraiser. Um, what trolley run is, it's a 4 mile walk and run for our families and all of our communities of supporters to really come out in one day and start up at 75th and Warnell up near Waldo and be able to walk or run all the way down to the Country Club Plaza. So that's about a 4 mile distance that we have elite runners who are finishing within 17 or 18 minutes for those 4 miles. And then we have families who are taking an hour and a half to walk down, enjoying a beautiful Sunday morning, and really get to celebrate their students and their students' achievements. It's certainly not a coincidence that we have it so close to graduation because it's a really, really beautiful metaphor of all these different people who are finishing at different speeds, um, going at their own pace, right? But they still achieve that goal of crossing the finish line together.
Mhm.
And I think that that's a really, really powerful thing for our families to see and observe is that whenever, like Carrie talked about earlier with our functional vision evaluations, when those families come into the room and they have gotten this scary diagnosis and are going through a grieving process, right? Finishing a 4 mile race is not something that's usually on their radar of something that's possible for their child, but it is possible for our families through trolley run. And so we see individuals, we see para athletes who are doing it out there too. We see, our students who are in wheelchairs, who have white canes, who are running right alongside all of their peers. So that's a really, really incredible thing to be able to do for our families and really make it a good celebration of Kansas City Children's Center for the Visually Impaired and the families that we serve. So it's a great day out there in April.
Perfect. What do you guys, how does it feel to represent an organization that's been around for 70 plus years?
I'll let Carrie take that one. That's a big question.
It is a big question. My first thought is probably inspiring. I mean, the number of stories we got to share 2 stories with you today.
Mhm.
But the number of stories when you meet, like the mom I told you that called and said, "Hey, connect me with a family," right?
Right.
She has a 50-year-old child. So how do we how do we keep that going, right? And so it's a little bit daunting, but it's mostly inspiring because you want the good work to keep happening in Kansas City. You want to expand it. You want to honor it, and that's what we hope we're doing.
Right. And to Carrie's point too, we don't even like the word alumni around CCVI because you're really never not a part of the CCVI family once you're connected. So, when we talk about again those, individuals who have been with the organization for 50 years, I remember there were multiple times within the past year or so that we've had alumni who were there in that initial classroom, that one room classroom that we talk about in the basement of a church. We have those individuals who have come back and said, hey, like my teacher was so and so, and we have providers who are like, yes, I started, 2 decades ago with so and so, and so that was a really really powerful thing to always see that just has a funny way of looping back around, and sort of revisiting our lives at CCVI. That's really really beautiful, and I think the thing that we always try to do is like Carrie said, really honor what has come before us and the work that's come before us. So making sure that, in their true spirit of having a need in the community that wasn't being met and doing what it takes to fill that need, that's what we want to do too to honor that legacy. So figuring out where are the vacancies, across the area and how can we plug in because we have a responsibility too. That was the spirit of which our organization was founded. And so we have the privilege and the honor to be able to carry that on.
Sure. Let's see. You kind of touched on this, I think, a little bit earlier. How does CCVI work with schools and communities to ensure visual impairments they receive the necessary support?
So we did talk about that.
Yeah.
I would say I will add to the schools that really whatever that IEP team determines, and often we serve on that IEP team as well alongside those school providers and the could be the first steps providers, the family. We make sure that whatever it is that that team feels like that child needs, that's our job. But in the community, we have just finished a project at, and I don't know if I can say it, World War I Museum.
Oh yeah, you can say
Okay.
it. Go
Okay,
for it.
thanks. We just finished a project at World War I Museum to ensure that it is accessible to anyone who visits who is blind or visually impaired. So that is a really cool project in the community, and we have another upcoming project that we just signed on for so that our impact goes beyond education and goes into that those living pieces of being in a community and having an accessible community. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is really cool. I love that.
And one other thing that I would say too about collaboration, um, you know, a really quick story, and Carrie knows obviously this from her experience in public school, but my mom is a special education teacher, and she has been for about 35 years. She is a phenomenal educator, and she had a child actually who had Down syndrome. This wonderful little boy who was nonverbal, and this child had a hard time making some progress on his goals, particularly a lot of his language goals. That's really where she saw the biggest hurdle for her as a teacher, as a special education teacher, was really getting him the progress that he needed on language. So, when he had his AAC device, right, that's really where she was like, man, he's just not taking to it like we really want him to, like his speech paths are wanting him to. I don't know what the solution is for this. And she was my mom's an elementary school teacher. And so, once he, went to middle school, then obviously he was off her caseload, and we're still connected with the family. And I ran into the mother of that child not too long ago. And she says, "Hey, Connor, I just wanted to let you know, I know the work that you do with Children's Center for the Visually Impaired. Um, my child actually just got a diagnosis of cortical visual impairment, and we didn't know it until he was in middle school. So when we talk about the screening and identification, that only comes through collaboration." And she told me too, she says, we obviously, partner up with Down Syndrome Guild, Down Syndrome Innovations, I say, is I think now what they're called. And they actually started looking for this because of a presentation that Children's Center for the Visually Impaired did. And so that was such a inspirational full circle moment that I called my mom and I told her about it, and I was like, "Hey, that was probably why he wasn't making progress on his AAC devices because it wasn't high enough contrast. There was too much visual clutter for him to be able to use it effectively as his voice." And she says, "I can't believe that that was under my nose for 5 years, and I didn't get it. I missed it. And so being able to get there early and do those community presentations, right, and partner with schools and get them informed on what cortical visual impairment is a game changer for kids being able to make progress or not making progress. So we feel like
Lord,
it's the one thing that we try to make a constant priority is getting out there.
perfect. What do you feel are some or excuse me, what impact has the MOVE program, had on students in Kansas and Missouri?
So I would say the MOVE program, our focus is to really get out and, like I said, support those kiddos in that school. It could be at age 3 and it could be all the way up to age 21. And so it's really just ensuring that that school, that neighborhood school where their peers, where their siblings go, where their family goes to the carnival, the school carnival, that they're able to be really successful in that space. And that is really what MOVE program is all about. And like I said, totally individualized, could be completely different, but really the power is keeping a student in that neighborhood school and seeing them be very successful there. So there's a lot of pieces that go into that, and collaboration, again, being
Mhm.
the number one piece that we really have to work on with that school and that family.
What are some of the biggest challenges, CCVI, faced when it first started?
You know, I think it's interesting because obviously organizations that have been around 70 years, always have some sort of ebb and flow, right? And I think that the thing that's most interesting to me from, sort of that strategic standpoint is the fact that if you don't have ebb and flow, you're really not doing your job as a nonprofit organization because you really need to meet the need of the populations that you serve. So it's funny to see some challenges of, when CCBI got started, all the way back in 70 years ago and have some of those problems, pop up now based on, kind of that ebb and flow that I talk about. So, one of those things is always staffing. I think that with such a specific population in individuals who are blind or visually impaired, that is such a specialty that really is hard to recruit for, I think. And when we talk about recruitment, it's not necessarily recruitment for CCVI. We have to go back way, way, way farther to when, you know, education majors who are in their undergrad are getting ready to graduate, or even before they're getting ready to graduate, and say, hey, you should really consider going down this super specific avenue because there's a critical shortage in this field of certified teachers of the visually impaired or certified orientation and mobility specialists. And frankly, too, from what we're seeing across education and medical, for those related disciplines as well of physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech language pathology. So that critical shortage of qualified providers is a huge challenge for us now, and it's always been a huge challenge. So
Mhm.
we're really looking at figuring out innovatively how do we make it a desirable field for individuals to come in and really make a difference with. But I'll let Carrie see if there's
Well,
anything
and
else.
quite honestly, how do we even inform them that it exists?
Yeah.
Because
Mhm.
with this
Mhm.
low of incidence of a population, if you're in elementary, middle, and high school, and you never experience a friend, a peer that has a visual impairment, you don't
Right, you
really
know about
know
it.
that
Mhm.
orientation and mobility is a thing. You don't know that there's a teacher specifically trained to teach and ensure that kids have access to that regular curriculum called a teacher of the visually impaired. So it's really it's really about informing kids at a very young age. So that's a lot of the work that we do in the community as well.
Mhm.
Very, very powerful. The earlier like you said, the earlier intervention, better. So,
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
all right, are there any specific tools or technologies that have made a big difference for children with visual impairment
So I would say tools and technology change, I think, literally daily.
constantly?
So for us, the challenge is making sure that we are keeping up with kiddos and what they need. So the Bright Act, which was passed in Missouri several years ago, gives each child in Missouri the right to an assistive technology evaluation yearly. Typically, in special education, you will see 3-year reevals, but the Bright Act has demanded a few things yearly. So it really has forced our educators to take a really deep look at each child's needs and look for what technology really meets those needs. So I think
Mhm.
that's probably um, in a very generic way, the big impact that we've had there. Um,
I would also probably throw out too, when we talk about technology, it's a really, really powerful tool that our providers are excellent at implementing. But there's also something to be said about the low tech side of things too. And so when we talk about interventions like Braille, which really is sort of classified as a technology, right, and learning media assessments and everything like that. What we want to figure out is number one, if the child is a Braille reader, right? The common thing that we frequently hear is, well, we have so many audiobooks out there and, so many incredible, resources that can deliver content in a using technology in an innovative way, right?
Mhm.
But until we stop teaching kids reading and writing in schools, we have to provide an alternative for literacy and those literacy skills that a child needs to be able to thrive in a school environment. So, what I think CCVI is excellent at is pairing low tech with high tech to make sure that the child has a whole umbrella of resources at their disposal that they can use to be able to thrive. I don't know if you'd have anything more on that one.
well, no, except that I think the other key to that is that we have a team. So we have a
Mm,
teacher of the visually impaired, we have an orientation mobility specialist, but we also have physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech and language pathologists. We have a social worker. We try to really surround that student, and once we figure out what it is that they need, we've got a specialist that can support that. And they're a specialist that's been working at CCVI and understands vision because that's also a different take. When you're a speech language pathologist working on language, you can't present it in the same way that you would to a fully fully visioned child. So it's in a powerful because it's a team. And again, it goes back to collaboration. So
yeah, and taking care of each other too as providers. I
right.
think that that's so important because when you have an environment where, the supporters or the providers know who their allies are in their corner, which is their other providers, they feel so much more empowered to try things because they have sounding boards. So, when we talk about having all of our providers located in one office, not only is that really a phenomenal resource for families so that they don't have to go seven different places for different
Mhm.
therapies, but also too, those providers, they're having lunch together, right? They're, going to Royals games, and stuff like that together. It's a phenomenal environment for them to be able to get close as a community of providers because then their work gets so much more seamless. So I think that's kinda what Carrie's
Yeah.
talking about too.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So, how has your work at CCVI changed your perspective on disabilities and education?
I would say that I have learned a lot. And after being in a field for 30 plus years, you think that you know a lot, but you
Mhm.
always know you have more to learn. And being a lifelong learner, that's
Mhm.
what we do,
Right.
right? But I think I just am so blown away that we don't have better knowledge about cortical visual impairment. That's probably the one to me that just I continuously and the story that Connor told about his mom, that kiddo was at my school prior to that. So
Oh.
we missed it too because we
Mhm.
didn't know.
Mhm.
And so I think that to me is highly motivating to get out there and share the news and ensure that kids get what they need early.
Yeah, I would say that when I think about, when I started at CCVI compared to, where I am now 4 years into the future, I think that having a background in special education, through, my mom, like I said, my mom's special education teacher. My sister is the regional director for clinics for kids with autism. My girlfriend is a speech language pathologist. So you get a lot of kind of those early childhood, elementary years. Um, and I think what you miss sometimes from that vantage point is seeing where kids end up and the things that they go on to do. And CCVI, because we have such a long history of, 70 plus years, it's been really, really incredible to see what our students are doing in their next lives, right? So, we have students who have gone to Harvard for law school. We have an alumni who won the Paralympics gold medal in Japan.
Oh,
In the 100-meter dash. We have students who have been business executives and, doctors and lawyers and so many, just super, super successful individuals. And I think that that's been one of the most inspiring things about working at CCVI is being able to see and fast forward like on a cassette tape of what does life look like for kids who are blind or visually impaired? And how do we provide the foundation for it? So I think that being able to see what those initial skills set you up to do is something that I took for granted before I started working at CCVI because I didn't have the whole picture. And once I found the whole picture, that's really what motivates you to do change and make action happen.
Well said. That's
Very
Thanks.
well
that's
said.
actually perfect. Mhm.
It's true.
Yep.
It's true.
So, what are your guys' personal and organizational goals for CCVI for the future?
So I think a lot of I think we continue with the cortical visual impairment education of our community. I think that we continue with advocacy because we know that we need to represent our states, our communities for our population and make sure that needs are met and that resources are available. I think that we need to continue to grow our ability, which means to ensure that we are of the highest quality in everything that we do. So staying super current and up to date and collaborative with each other to continue to be learners and risk takers so that we're trying those new things and we're in a supported environment. So I think it's keeping a good culture at CCVI, it's staying cutting edge at CCVI, and it's really collaborating with your whole community to ensure kids need what no have what they need.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that when I look at CCVI and what I envision for the organization, um, what know is that the education that a child gets is predominantly decided by what their zip code is. And so I think that one of the beauty one of the beautiful things about CCVI is the fact that we're able to kind of transcend those zip codes and bring, like Carrie said, the highest quality to kids regardless of their background. So, one of, the most shocking things I feel like that I, know about CCVI is the fact that 51% of our families live at or below the federal poverty line, right? So it's making sure that when they have barriers, that doesn't impact the quality of education that they receive. So when we talk about, where that starts from, it really starts from our staff. And so I think that our staff is doing incredible things and they have such a good mindset, I feel like this year, of wanting to grow and wanting to develop more skills because we know that if we provide high quality, right, that's going to make a high quality individual. So really ensuring that regardless of where children are, that we go out to them to meet their needs. And that goes far beyond Kansas City too. So we have to, I think, really remain nimble as an organization and flexible to be able to meet the need. Um, Regardless of what zip code the child is in. That's always gonna be our number one priority, I think, going forward, and it's also gonna be a focus of our staff.
Agree.
Perfect. All right. Well, that concludes our podcast today. Do you guys have anything further that you would want to add?
Well, I mean, number one, you guys do such incredible work here at The Whole Person that we're always really grateful for partnership with you all. I think that one of the incredible things about our fields, right, is that you guys get to really kind of see that whole picture that sometimes we miss from, just an education standpoint. So that's something that we're always really grateful to get to partner with you all on. And obviously make sure that you guys mark your calendars too for trolley run out in April. That's going to take
Definitely.
place, I believe, on April 27th this year, 2025. So mark that down and hopefully see all of you guys out on race day because it'd be a lot of fun to get to partner with you guys farther on that.
Most definitely. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. I loved learning all about CCVI and all of your guys' knowledge. Loved it. So hope to see you again.
Absolutely. You too.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's all for our podcast today with the whole podcast, Casey. We will see you next time. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining our podcast today. I'm going to go over some of our monthly events. Our first event that we have is Getting Social, which is going to be the first Friday of each month. Our next event that we have is Time to Spare, which is going to be the third Wednesday of the month. Our next group will be Mind's Eye View, which will be the first Monday of each month. And our last group that we have is DIY Skills, for young adults, and that is going to be the last Wednesday of the month. For more information, please visit our website at thewholeperson.org and stay tuned.